Okay, so this is scaffolding for littles. What is scaffolding? So scaffolding is the educational idea that you break learning into small, digestible little chunks. It's a pretty straightforward concept, even if you don't know, even if you've never heard of it, you're probably already doing it as a teacher. But it's about using physical prompts and visual aids and really simple questions to get students to understand something. So it would kind of be like if you just told a student 2 + 2 = 4, and they're not getting it for some reason. It's not broken down enough for them and the way that their brain is developed so far. They just don't understand it. So you could do something like you start with breaking it all the way down to what is one apple. This is an apple, apple. And you're teaching them one concept and you're really nailing that easiest breakable piece down first. And then you're gonna add, this is 2 apples, 1, 2, and so on and so on. Eventually they're going to see visually and in many ways that, that there are 4. And you might get them to do this written and auditorily and literally hold apples and figure it out and count with you. Like there's so many ways that you can do it, right? And that's just an example that's not very musical, but the idea is when I say scaffolding, if your students aren't getting what you're teaching them, then you might want to start thinking about learning more about how you can scaffold. There's a lot of techniques on like YouTube and TikTok and you name it. But for music, for example, one of my favorites is students in a lot of early childhood music books for piano, students really just learn to anchor to like 2 black keys, 3 black keys, 2 black keys, 3 black keys, because there's this pattern across the entire piano. And I always show them, if you can learn this part, it just repeats over and over. And then you're anchoring from there, 2 black keys, there's always a C here. So then we go 2, 3, is this a C? No, that's 3 black keys. You're gonna use those anchors and like scaffolding pieces, and eventually you won't even need to show them 3 and 2 black keys. They just know where C is. They just now get it. And there's so many reasons for that, but again, just breaking it down to those little chunks can really help. Same with, with the 2 black keys. D is in the dinosaur cave, right in the middle. E is on the other side over here. Here's E, right? And then so on and so on. So yeah, using physical prompts, aids, simple questions. Okay, so using traceables and allowing parent help when needed. Those are 2 other things. So we have a lot of traceable worksheets in Music Munchkins. If you need more, or if you're having a student who's really struggling, you can look into even on the internet. There's so many free traceable music sheets. We want to keep kids all together and caught up together as much as possible, but when you have a really tough student, that can help when they're brand new. And even on the sheets that don't have traceables. So this is, let's say they were doing C, D, E, and F, and there's one kid who like seems to get it, like they can answer your questions. They know where it is on the whiteboard when you point to the note, but they just can't write their letters well. Well, you could probably do them a favor and make a few traceable letters. So I would write like dots that would make a C, and I'd be like, can you see if you can trace my C? And like for the parents, I can be over here, and for the parents, the other good thing is they might see that as weird because it's not really musical in some ways, but you can kind of make it positive and say like, this is great, you're getting practice for school and you're learning about music, because they really are learning still a lot about their alphabet and how letters and numbers work when they're young in this class. So yeah, just a few more things. Keeping it simple, one clear question at a time. I can even be bad for this sometimes where, what's a good example? Let me find this one sheet here. Okay. If there's a note that I'm teaching them, this is like a review sheet for them towards the end of the level. If I'm teaching them a note and it's the quarter note, I'm not gonna say, what is this called and how many beats does it get? And do you remember? It's like colored in with a stick. You don't wanna give them so much information all at once and so many questions. You wanna keep it simple first. Does anybody know what this is? And if you hear silence after a question, you can A, repeat it again. Does anybody know what this is? Make sure they can all see. If that's too much, then you rephrase the question only then. So, what is this note called? Another way to ask the question, it starts with a qu, And I find that's a really good one because a lot of times the students know what it is as soon as they hear like the opening sound of a note or a rest. And then how many beats does it get? You know, how many beats do we hold this note? How many beats does it get? Then you can give them options if they can't figure it out. Does it get 2 beats or did it get 4? Because sometimes, again, it's like a multiple choice test versus open question. If you give them the options, they can start to recall better. So keeping simple, clear questions, breaking it down and not getting too broad on them, and let them digest it. And also know kids are really shy, and you can, especially with young kids, the wheels turn, they take a bit longer. You can give them a few seconds and give them like a look. Say, I'm gonna wait. Anybody know? You know, give them a chance to think about it and be brave. And then the other thing is like, if you're finding that consistently with lots of things you're doing in class, some of them are just scared then, and you can say, you know, there's no wrong answer. You can tell me it, like, even if you're wrong, it's not a big deal. I just want you to guess. And then you're praising their effort. So if a student says the whole note gets 3 beats, which it doesn't, you say, you know what, it actually gets 4, but you know what I like about what Elijah just said? He took a chance. He guessed. I'm really proud of him. Good job. You're learning, you know? So that's a good way to praise wrong answers in a way that will make kids feel safer, maybe making mistakes in class. Okay, modeling, showing them what you do before you do it. This is a great sheet to come back to. I always hold up their worksheet and demonstrate first, even like just visually. I'm like, okay, so let's pretend I'm drawing my hand, okay. And if it's another sort of worksheet, like these can be tough. So for example, I'm showing them this sheet. I want to know whether they don't understand the instructions or if they just don't understand the concept. And the best way to make sure that they're going to not worry about the instructions is to show them this sheet again before they all get one handed out to them. And I'll say, you know, we're gonna find all the E's just like we did. Look, this E on the board is just like this one on that bottom never ending line in the treble clef. And then I'll show them, you know, there's an example here. It's circled in green. You want to circle all the notes that look just like the one inside this green circle, right? So there's a lot of ways to explain it to them before they even touch the sheet. And then, you know, you can even, if you really think the class like needs extra support before they start, you can say, is this one right? No, that's not an E, that's a C. Is this an E? No, it doesn't have a line slicing through the middle. You know, you can give them a few examples. And then another thing is kids will love to have your help, and that's a really good thing. But you want to know, you'll find some kids just want it because they want to hang out with you again. So the good thing to do is if a kid comes up to you, I need help, and they start to do it, you're going to guide them to the answer, but not give them the answer. You know, you're going to make them think on their own. So sometimes I'll have a smart student and they're like, I don't know what this is. And I'll say, okay, well, does it have a line through it? Yeah. Does it blah, blah, blah? Yeah. Well, is it C or D? It's C. And then I'll say, see, you know, you're really smart. You already know the answers. And then they'll gain confidence, and they'll also like start doing it on their own more, because some kids will cling to you too much. And so then I'll also say something like, I'm so proud of you. So here's what I want you to do. I know you're very smart. I want you to do this by yourself so that you can learn, and then you can show me and I'll help you with the ones that we need to fix, okay? And then that way, you know, you're encouraging them to do their own work. I've heard a really good expression about this. I'm trying to think of what it is, but basically the idea is if you are helping a child do everything, you're only boosting your confidence. You're not boosting theirs. You are making you feel better because you're like, oh, I'm such a good teacher, I'm whatever. I've heard this through parenting stuff. I'm such a good parent. But really, if you're being a good teacher or a good role model to a child, then you want them to learn, even if it's kind of painful for you to not tell them the answer, because you're building their confidence, not yours. So just remember not to be too givey with the answers with the students either, because they'll depend on you way too much. And then when you get to level gold, they're going to be really confused at what they're doing. And you don't want that as a teacher. That's chaotic. So we went through a lot of this. Encourage both group and individual responses. This is a big one. Okay. When I do a class, I don't want kids who are lost to just like chameleon in and hear everyone else shout A, and so then they all shout A. We don't want that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna always ask in the Munchkins class, especially, you know, For group responses, it builds their confidence up. They work together. What is this? This is C. What is this? This is G. But then I'm going to say something like, okay, now we're going to go around to each friend and they're going to answer a question. And don't worry, I'm here to help, even though really they're going to do it alone. I like to ease the anxiety for the kids that are scared to approach it. You might want to start with a confident child and work your way through the group. And then when you get to a student who's having trouble, again, that's scaffolding, you might say, we know this one is D. What's this? And then I find singing like the alphabet with them. A, B, C. So you're kind of getting them there, but you're gonna see how far they can go on their own before you add all those scaffolding tools. And then also, because they're doing it alone, you and the parent watching, which is great for them, can kind of tell if their kid is getting it or needs a little bit more help at home. And that's a conversation you can have after class. I love that Daniel's doing such a good job. I know he's newer to the class, so like this is going to be harder at first. I think that he could really build more confidence in his music alphabet if he practiced it a bit at home. So yeah. If you are doing group shout out answers, I like to always say to all of them, if you don't know the answer and you hear all your friends shout the answer, repeat it out loud. Say it with them after so that you also learn. So in other words, I'll say, what does this know? If a bunch of kids shout A, but there's always 2 kids in the back who aren't, then I'll say, that's right, A. Let's say that again as a group and memorize it. For those of you who don't know, everybody say it, say A. And then that way you are not embarrassing anyone, but you're making sure everyone's speaking. And you can say, you're gonna get extra prize tickets if I hear you really loud. And then finally, in this little part I had written down, but this was from behavior as well, redirect shout outs by ignoring shout outs and calling intended students by names. So this is kind of frustrating as a teacher, and it's just a part of it. But in the early childhood classes, sometimes you'll get a kid who, when it's not their turn, constantly shouts the answer over another kid. And I like to just tell them, at least once or twice before ignoring it, I really love that you want to help Annie, but the only way that Marcus is going to learn is if you let him say his answer on his own. So I think you need to wait until your turn, and when I call your name, then you're going to get your moment to shine, okay? And sometimes kids are fine with that and they understand, and other times they'll just keep interrupting, in which case there's 2 things. I'll say, if I keep hearing friends shout out that when it's not their turn, they're going to lose their prize tickets. And I might even go as far, if a kid does it a lot, as to say, okay, that's a prize ticket gone, and you don't even have to direct a name. They'll know that it's them, and they'll kind of start to back off. And then after a while, if it's really excessive, then you're going to completely ignore it, and you're just going to talk to the parent after the class about good strategies. All right, final reminder is be Miss Rachel or the Wiggles, energetic, expressive. Celebrate small wins for students. And don't spend all your energy on one child. Let parents support too. If a child's falling behind and you've already given them a few minutes of individual attention, you can call upon the parent because they're in that age range of 4 to 6. Hey, do you mind, wherever Irene's mom is, do you mind coming over and assisting her for just a second? I want to make sure that she is following along. Easy peasy. All right, the next video is about parent feedback.